welcome to week 3. For week 2, we worked on a particular assignment. So I'm just going to pull that up. I'm going to pull up the final one. I've actually published, no, this is week 3. So I've actually published or pushed the final copy of week 2 to GitHub. So let me quickly show that. So if you check my GitHub account, you'll see an update on, you can see 31 minutes ago. So I just pushed this to GitHub. You can see week 2 is there. You can see final and starter. If you open final, you can see what I have as a final, my own copy of the assignment or my own solution to the assignment. So this is here. For those who have access to the GitHub repo, let me paste that now so that you can pull that or clone. But for those who already have access, just go ahead and pull the latest copy of the source code. So you can compare this with what you did last week. Again, the submissions ended yesterday, right? So if you, of course, you can still go ahead to submit your assignment, but based on how we're going to assess the assignments, everything ended yesterday. But in case you've not really worked on it, or you just started working on it yesterday, or you didn't really have time to finish up, yes, please still go ahead to push your source code to GitHub and copy j.ajibade@gmail.com like we've been doing. So yeah, week 2 is here. Also look at week 3. Week 3 starter files are here. The content is here, and then the images are here. So we're going to start working on week 3 today as well, after reviewing the week 2 assignment. So this is what I have for week 2, right? So we started working on Africa Gazette. Look at the header, the links or hyperlinks, the H1 elements, which is the title, in this case, the title of the blog post. So there are different tags in the HTML and all that. So let me just quickly go straight to that on VS Code. Somebody's asking how to submit the assignment. Please make sure to join the Discord community. We post this almost every day on how to submit the assignment. You submit by creating a repo on GitHub, pushing the code there, and adding my email. Okay, let me just quickly do this, or let me put it on the chat. So once you push your code to GitHub, add j.ajibade@gmail.com. So invite that email to your repo. So once I accept your invite, I will have access to the repo. Again, you are creating a private repo. There's a video online. There's a video on our YouTube channel that talks about how to create a private repo, how to push to GitHub. All right, so let's review assignment 2, or assignment for week 2. So I'm going to double click on this. So last week we talked about semantic HTML or semantic web. So basically what that talks about is we are giving meaning to the HTML tags. There are different tags here. Before HTML5, there was really nothing. Well, semantic web has been around, for a long time, but HTML5 actually made it popular. So what we're trying to do with semantic HTML is to make sure that we're giving meaning to our HTML tags, not just, the visuals, not just the beauty of the page. What we're trying to do is to make sure that people who are maybe, who have one form of impairment or the other, who are visually impaired, people who are unable to use the website like every other person, will still be able to use the website despite their physical challenge, right? So that is the idea behind semantic web. And it also helps search engine optimization. So for example, I was talking about having semantic web, right? So now you can see what I have here. I saw a few of the submissions. Some of you, yes, you did a tag and all that. You know, the best practice is to envelope all your links, all your hyperlinks, all your menu items, right? Envelope them with a nav tag, a nav tag. So take note of that. When you have a link, you know, the best practice when you have menu items on a website, let's go to any website. Let's say okay, let's go to this one, of course. So once you have these are menu items, if you can see my screen, this is the header or the head of this web page. So once you have this sort of menu items at this level, the best practice following HTML5 standard, following semantic web, you know, is to put this inside a nav element. Nav short for navigation, you know. I'm navigating this page. That's the idea. I'm navigating. I'm navigating. So that when a screen reader reads this page, a screen reader is it could be a software that helps people who are visually impaired to be able to read or you know to be able to use your website. So if a screen reader reads this website to somebody, you should be able to tell that person, oh, this section, this is a navigation. You know, that word navigation means that, or immediately it should help the user to be able to identify or know exactly what they are to do. Navigation means I want to move around the website. I want to go from page to page. So that is the meaning that we are trying to attach to that particular tag. So that's what semantic HTML is all about. So let's go back to the code again. So you can see I'm wrapping all my links round with a nav element. So for those that did that, kudos. I saw a few people did this. That's good. That's one. Also, let's check our, let me remove this. Let's go back to our page. So for this again, another best practice is to have the branding of your website clickable, right? The branding should be clickable. So there is an icon, you can see an icon here, and then there is the name of this website. So together we can say this is the logo, right? Or the branding. So best practice is make sure the branding is clickable from any page. So if I click on this now, I'm still on this page. If I visit the people, this is a separate page. You can see on the URL bar, I can see slash people.html. So this is a different page. I've navigated to a different page, but my headers, or my header rather, is still showing. So meaning that I can easily click on this branding or on this logo and it should take me back to the home page. So take note. So best practice is to also link the branding or the logo of the website to the home page so that users can easily click on that web page. For example, look at this site now. Anywhere you are on this page, like this is the contact form. Anywhere I am, I should be able to click on this logo and then it takes me back to the home page. It takes me back to the home page. So take note of that. So yeah, so look at what I did. What I did was to wrap, you know, what we did last week was to create an H1 element only. That's what we did last week. But I've updated it. I've now wrapped it around with an anchor tag, And this, you know, every anchor tag, well, every element actually has attributes, right? So this is the href attributes, that is hypertext reference. That means where am I linking this h1 tag to? I'm linking it to the same home page, which is the index.html. By convention, the home page is usually named index.html or index.php if you are doing PHP, or index dot what have you. You understand? So that is just a convention. You can actually change this on the web server end. If you are hosting your website on, let's say, Nginx or Apache web server and all that, you can reconfigure these default settings. But by default, the home page should be named index.html. So that's that for the header. For those that did that, kudos. Then wrapping everything again, we're talking about semantic HTML. There's a particular tag that should be used as a best practice is the header tag. Last week we talked about documentation. Always, when you have something or when you see a tag that you do not understand, especially for our new developers on the call, if you hover your mouse over a particular tag, VS Code pops up this tooltip or small pop-up here, and it tells you what that element does. It says the header element represents introductory content for its nearest ancestor sectioning content or sectioning root element. So basically, the ideal scenario is to use the header element as the head of a section. The head, if you have an article, for example, you can use header as the head of that part, the head of the section. So the header tag is another HTML5 element to use for sectioning, a website heading. Look at, so we can see this whole part as the heading of this website, and the heading is reusable. So if I go to a new page, you can see the heading doesn't change. Most times for a website, your heading remains. If I go to a new page, look at this website now, the heading still remains from here upwards. The heading remains, meaning this part downwards is the main content of the website. So as I navigate from page to page, the heading still remains. If I go to home page, the heading still remains. So it is reusable. So when you start building reusable components, by the time we get to React, we're still going to talk about React, how to use React to build components for your website and all that. So you start appreciating what I mean by reusing a section or a component of a website. Imagine building, okay, let me just quickly demo this now. So this page, look at this Africa Gazette has two pages. One, the home page, right? And then if I click on the people, this is another page. So there's people.html and then index.html, which is what we have here. People.html, this, and then index.html. So you discover that for every page of all the pages or these two pages, I've repeated this header here. You can see header in people.html, inside index, header inside index.html. But so the best practice is not to repeat yourself. In coding, in software engineering, try as much as possible not to repeat yourself, right? So when we get to, JavaScript, programming, React, and all that, we see how to reuse components such that you can easily update a component in one place, and then it reflects in all locations where it has been referenced. So meaning that if I want to change the title of our website now, Africa Gazette, to something else, I have to do it in two places. If I come to index.html, I rename it to Africa Magazine, right? So, and I come back here, let me go home. You can see Africa Magazine is here. But if I go to the people page, it says Africa Gazette. So imagine having like 50 pages, 100 pages, because a website can be that large. You can have 200 pages, right? Do you have to repeat updating all those pages. You don't do that. So that's why you should reuse. Don't repeat yourself. But of course, at this level, this is still introductory. We have to do this for us to have those separate pages. So meaning that I have to come here and rename this to, let me just copy this, come here, rename. So if I go to the browser, you can see I'm in the people.html page. It's Africa Magazine. If I go back home, it's Africa Magazine. So what I'm trying to say is you don't repeat yourself when you are programming. So I've renamed this to Africa Gazette. Rename this to Africa Gazette so that we'll have our page. All right, so we've talked about the header. I just want us to quickly go over this because we have CSS to write. Then there's another tag called main. Again, if you read the documentation, it says the main element represents the main content of the body of a document or application. Somebody's asking, why can't we go here, go here, go here, go here? The reason we cannot go to the land, the language, weather, culture is that I don't have pages for those, right? So you can create pages. In your source code, you can see how I linked the people. Look at people.html. Look at this line 17 here. See, there is a page for the people. I don't have a page for the land, for language, for weather, and for culture. Look at this left-hand side here. I have index.html and people.html. I don't have any other page for all these other elements, all these other hyperlinks. So that's why you can't click on those. So yes, that's a test for you. You can create more pages and link them just the way it is linked here. So I was talking about main. So main is another HTML5 tag you can use for the main content of your document. There's another one called article. So I'm using article here because it is related to what we are building, right? So we are building a blogging platform, and this is an article that we are displaying, so we can use an article for that. So again, under this article, we have a header and then some paragraphs, and so on and so forth. Then at the bottom, I'm having an aside element, an aside tag, aside, for something like this, right? You can see related posts. So by the time you style this page, what we want to do is to move this related post maybe towards the bottom horizontally or aligned to the right hand side of the web page, right? So that's what you'll be doing. So once we cover CSS today, your assignment for week 3 is to style this page, what you've worked on, right? Style it and then align content the way you want it to be aligned. So, but of course, we're going to see how to use CSS and start so you can complete assignment for week 3. So yeah, that's the summary of, okay, I also have a footer. So semantically, there's another tag called a footer. So if you have, look at this web page again. So I'm regarding this as the footer of the element. Again, a footer should be reusable. For example, like this web page now, if I scroll down, this section here is the footer section. It should be reusable. So if I go to another page, let's say about, and scroll down, you can see the same footer, right? It's just the best practice. So when users land on your page, you want to try as much as possible to make their browsing experience, great, make it convenient for them, user experience great, right? So if I land on a web page and I click on another page and I scroll down, and then there is no link that takes me back to the home page, or there are no links that are linking to other resources or other pages on the site, it doesn't give a good user experience, right? So that is um, that is the idea of reusing components. You can see this part two is reused. All these buttons, they are components that are reused. Only what is changing is the the text, and then when you hover on them. So if I hover on this button, you can see the color changes to green. If I move away, changes back to white. The background changes back to white. For this one, the color changes to white, the background changes to white, the color of the text changes to green. But if I move away, it goes back to the default state. So these are some of the things that you can do with CSS, which is what we're going to talk about today. So that's the brief review of week 2. Again, this particular solution is already on my GitHub repo. Go ahead, go through it, clone the repo, or copy the repo, download the repo, and then run it on your laptop to have a better understanding of what has been done. So that's that. Somebody saying images are not showing up. Check the directory structure. Check the directory structure of your file. Look at this. Look at my source code. Look at this image. Where do I have an image? Where do I have an image? So let me search img. Now look at this. africalanguages.jpg. See the directory structure, images slash. Now it is because I have a folder named images. So you have to go into the folder first, slash the name of the image. That's when the image is going to display on your web page. So take note of that. You must follow the directory structure. Assuming all the image files are on the same level as this HTML page, that means assuming all these images are not in this folder, then I won't prefix that directory, that URL with images. So maybe that's what you did. So take note of that. Follow the directory structure of where your resources are. Could be your CSS, your images, anything you are linking to, you must follow the URL properly. So week 3, let me close this. Week 3, let's talk about CSS. CSS. So I'm going to create a new file, index.html. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, we need a page. We need our HTML page, or markup rather. So the shortcut, so for those, we talked about Emmet last week, but for the beginners, try to type out your code yourself, right? It helps you to learn. It helps you to understand better when you're typing out the elements yourself, by yourself, and you are following the structure of what you are doing. But because this is, we're on a call and we have to move very fast, I'm going to use some shortcuts here provided by Emmet. So Emmet is a VS Code extension that helps you to auto-complete what you are doing. So if I just do what is this now? Exclamation mark, and I click enter, you can see it gives me the default HTML boilerplate code, meaning that this is a perfect, semantically correct HTML document or markup that you can have, right? So if I put an H1 tag here and I say, welcome to CSS, all right? So let's open this on the browser. This is the web page. Let's open this on the browser now. Let's see what we have done. Again, you can right click on this and open with live server. For those that are just joining us, last week we talked about live server. Live server is a development server that helps you to serve your pages locally when you are developing your website. So take note of that. It's an extension. You can add it to your VS Code by going to this tab here. You can see extensions. You can add it to your VS Code through this tab here. So if I right click on this, go to open with live server. It has opened on my other screen. So, but let me just bring it to this screen so you can see what that produced for us. Let me put them side by side so we can see both the source code and the output. All right. So this is the HTML code of a markup that produced this. This is H1 elements. Last week we talked about different elements, so H1 is one of them. So today we're talking about CSS. What is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Cascading Style Sheet, right? So cascading style sheet. The term cascading means that it is sequential. The rendering engine on your browser flows from top to bottom. So if I have the same CSS rule, yeah, they're called rules. If I have the same CSS rules on line, let's say on line 10, and I have another one on line 20, the one on line 20 takes effect because that is the latest one, as interpreted by the rendering engine. The engine runs from top to bottom, so it cascades down. So it is a style sheet, meaning that it helps you to style your web pages. It helps you to style your web pages. So that's what we're going to do today. So now, how do we use CSS in our HTML page? There are three ways of using CSS or embedding or having CSS connected to your web page. The first one is inline CSS, meaning that we can directly go to the HTML element and style those elements. For example, assuming I want to style this H1 element and give it, let's say we want to give it a different color. Let's give it a color red. We're just doing a demo, right? So what you do is there is an attribute called style. Every HTML element has an attribute called style. So you embed your CSS rules using the style attribute of that particular HTML element. In this case, our H1 element. So if I do style equals, you can see. So it brings double quotes. Inside the quote, now I can write the rule that I want to apply to the H1 element. So for example, there is a rule that says that is known as color, right? And you can see how VS Code is helping you to suggest, is auto completing what you're typing. It's good for advanced people, you want to work fast and all that. Yeah, it's very, very good. But for people who are just starting out, learn to type this thing yourself. So color, full colon, let's give it a particular color. Let's say red, right? Now, can you see the right-hand side, our page? Automatically, that is what Live Server is helping us to do. Live Server reloads your page instantly. You don't have to go and be clicking, refreshing, and all that. No, instantly, Live Server refreshes your page. So it speeds up development. As you are coding, as you are developing, it helps you to refresh your page. So what we just did here, we've styled this H1 element. You can see I can add more styles. How do you do that? Before then, let's talk about this. So what we have here is called a CSS rule. It's a rule. I'm applying a rule to this element, and the rule is that I want to change the color of this H1 element to red. Now let's do something. Let's put in a paragraph tag here. I am a paragraph, right? See, automatically it's appearing here now. What are we trying to establish here? A rule must always target a particular element. So you can see the H1 tag has a red color, but not the paragraph tag. The paragraph tag still has the default, black color. I believe this should be text size 16, depending on your browser. Most browsers have a text size 16 and all that, which we can actually change. So as I want to change the style of this paragraph, I can do style, then font size. There is a rule. Font size, let's do 30 pixel. 30 pixel. You can see the size has increased. Let's do 60 pixel. You can see the size has increased. But what we are doing here is that, what we're trying to establish here is that for CSS rule targets a particular element. So H1, only H1 is red, P is not red. Only P is having font size 60 pixel. H1 is not having that font size 60 pixel. So for every element, for every rule you write in your CSS, you are targeting a particular HTML element. So in CSS world, it is called selectors. That means what tag are we selecting? What HTML element are we trying to select, right? So like the first one now, I've selected the H1 element to have a red font color, and then I've selected or targeted the P or paragraph tag to have a font size of 16 pixel. So this is what is known as inline CSS. Inline, that means you are writing it directly on the same line of that particular HTML element. Let's take note of that. That's inline CSS. That's number one. Then number two, we also have what is known as internal. We can also have internal CSS. Let me put this as inline CSS. Internal CSS. So what I just did now is this is called comment. You are commenting out this portion of your HTML tag, so it doesn't get rendered on your web page. It doesn't get rendered. You can see when if I remove this and I remove this, we talked about this last week, you will see inline internal CSS appearing here, but I don't want that to appear here. So I just simply commented that out using this syntax here. So internal CSS, how do you use internal CSS? You come to the head section of your web page, right? And there is a tag or an element, an HTML element that is known as style. Now look at this. Let me give it more space. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so now this is an HTML tag, right? This is the opening tag. This is the closing tag, like we've talked about in the previous classes. For every opening tag, there is a closing tag. You identify a closing tag by this / in front of it. See, / that means I'm closing body, / I'm closing HTML. So we want to use the internal CSS method now, and we do that by using the style tag of HTML and then embedding our CSS here within the style. So let's go back to this same rule again. Let me comment out this. Let me copy it first, comment this out. The web page should be blank now. So, but we are dealing with internal CSS. Internal. So I don't need to do this. I don't need to do this. I want to target this CSS at this level internally in my source code. In my source code. So how do we do that? Again, we talked about selectors, right? So there is HTML. Can you go over how to comment out? Commenting. Comment is you open your angle brackets, your less than key, right? In mathematics, your less than, then exclamation, hyphen, the content you want to comment out, the contents, or let's say your comment, and then you close, hyphen, you close with greater than bracket. So take note, less than bracket or less than sign, which is, both of them are actually called angled brackets. So so that's the less than, exclamation, hyphen, your comment, then hyphen, you close the comment. That's how to do comments. So comments is a way of documenting your source code. We'll still talk about that when we start programming JavaScript and React and all that. So you document your source code so that others can understand. When you share your code with people, they should be able to understand what you've done. Also, you are documenting it for yourself as well, because after a while we tend to forget things. When you write a logic or a particular function in your program, there's every tendency for you to forget what that function is doing. So you comment or you document your code for posterity. All right, so that's that. Now we're talking about internal CSS. We've seen how inline is used. You type the source code, the style inline. That means directly on the H1 tag. But this case, we want to move this rule. We want to move this rule, this color :red, to this portion. And how do we do that? I mentioned the word selector. So what am I targeting? What am I selecting? What am I trying to style on this page? I'm trying to style H1 tag. So we'll still talk about that when we'll talk about selectors in a moment. So this particular type of selector is called type selector, H1. That means I'm selecting all H1 elements inside this web page, inside this body part. So I can now move my CSS here, my rule. Look at, so this is how it is defined. There is a selector H1. Then this part is called the declaration. You declare, declaration block, right? And then the rule. So this is the selector again, the selector, where you have the curly braces, these brackets, these curly braces is called the declaration block. Every CSS rule must reside in a declaration block, especially when you are doing internal or external, which we'll talk about very soon. You can see when we did inline CSS, we did not have to use the curly braces here. We didn't use curly braces here. It is because we are doing this inline. But when you are doing it internally using the style tag, you must put your rule and all the rules you have in between curly braces like this. For example, I want H1 to have a color of red. You can see it's already it has already taken effect here. Color is red. I want this same element to have another rule. I want to increase the font size. So I can do font size. Let's say 20 rem, which is going to be very, very big. So let's do 5 rem. We'll talk about dimensions and sizes later on. So we can see 5 rem, or let me use pixel. Let's do 100 pixel. So so in this block, look at this this CSS rule. The rule again starts with a selector. This is a type selector. Type meaning that I'm selecting an HTML type, an HTML element itself. There are other selectors. I can do a class selector. I can do an ID selector. There are different types of selectors, and there is also a type selector where I can actually target an HTML element directly. So look at, so I'm targeting H1, meaning that everywhere I have H1, let me reduce the size of this thing. Let's make it 50. Everywhere I have H1 on this web page, this rule is going to apply to them. So let's say I have another H1 again. Let me duplicate this. You can see. So we talked about not repeating yourself. Assuming we're doing inline CSS, we would have, gone into the H1 tag and then start doing all this everywhere we have that particular tag. We do this, and you keep on doing this everywhere you have H1, right? If I can type. Everywhere you have H1, right? But because you are using internal CSS, you can target every element, and then that particular rule will apply to all those elements. So let me undo all this. Undo this. So meaning I can give this a different title. This is another H1 tag. So now look at this. At just one point, I can change the rule and it will apply to all the elements that have been selected or targeted. I can make this size, let's say size 10. Automatically, the 2 HTML elements have been affected, have been redesigned, have been styled, right? So that's the one of the advantages of using internal CSS to style your page, All right. Now, what if we have so many HTML elements? Like, let's go back to this web page now and do view page source. Look at so many HTML elements, that we can target, that we can select to style. So it becomes cumbersome if you start doing all those internally in your file, in your markup. So by the time you start having, look at this line 8 to, let's say line 7 to 12, which is the style tag. By the time you start having 50 lines, 100 lines, 200 lines, 500 lines, 1,000 lines here, it becomes complex to manage. It becomes difficult to manage, right? So, and that is why there is another method known as the external CSS rule or method, So that way you can maintain your CSS in a separate file, not because in coding, bugs could come up, right? Assuming you are typing all your CSS internally and on the same page you are doing all the HTML pages, anything could go wrong, right? So, but if you separate those files out and you want to update only the CSS style, then you know that you are doing it in just the CSS file that is separate from this main HTML document. So it minimizes bugs or errors, right? So that is the essence of transferring. The best practice again is to use an external CSS. External CSS. So how do we do that? So I'm going to delete this since we want to try external CSS. Then the web page is back to the default settings. Yeah, we can say this text here is also styled, right? It is because every HTML element has a default style. You know, there's a font size, there is a default color, there is a default padding, and all. We'll talk about CSS box model very soon. So we use CSS to now overwrite the default style provided by HTML. So now let's talk about external CSS. So again, I'm going to copy all this, copy this, paste here. Let me comment this out. So we're having the default settings now. So how do we link, how do we do an external CSS? So let's go back to our folder. We're going to create a separate file in the same, you can put it anywhere you want, but of course, put it within your week 3 folder, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to create a file here, style.css, right? So you can see every CSS file should have an extension .css. Every HTML file should have an extension .html. So look at this now. We're having two files, the HTML file and the style.css file. And the style.css file. So how do we do the same styling again? By referencing the external file. We do that by using another attribute. Now we've seen two attributes for rendering CSS. One is the style attribute. That means you want to do it internally in this page or on this page. That's that. Then the next one for referencing an external CSS is the link attribute. Link attribute. So I can scroll down again. Emmet is helping me to, or is auto suggesting. So if I scroll down and select link :CSS, it gives me this. Again, for beginners, try to type all this out yourself, right? So now what are we doing here? Assuming this is not here. Now, what are we doing here? We want to style this page, one, and we are going to style this page using a file that is separate, that is outside this page. So how do you do that? You use this particular HTML tag called link. Look at the documentation. It says the link element allows authors to link their document to other resources. So it's not just for CSS, but these rel attributes, or called relationship attribute, tells this HTML element that I'm dealing with, or what I'm linking to, is a CSS document. It's a style sheet. So the rendering engine now knows how to render that particular CSS document. So now I'm telling this HTML page that I want to link to a style sheet. Now, where is the style sheet? Where is the style sheet? Remember href? Href, when we did anchor tags in our last week's assignment, is the same href again. Href meaning hypertext reference. That means I need a directory, I need a location where the CSS file is housed, is located, right? That is the meaning of hypertext reference. I want to refer to a particular resource. In this case, it's a style sheet. And you do that by putting the URL in this href attribute of this link element. So now, how do we locate this? Let's go back to what we have in this document. So the index and our style sheet are on the same level. Look at, they're on the same, that means they are both on inside week 3 folder. There is a final folder, there is a starter folder, and then there are now 2 files, index.html and style.css, meaning that all these elements, let me use the word elements, 2 folders and 2 separate files, they are on the same level. They are on the same level inside the week 3 folder. So, meaning that because the index and the style are on the same level, I can just go ahead and reference it directly, style.css. See? Style.css. Assuming this style.css is inside a particular folder, then that means this index.html and the style are no longer on the same level. So you must now follow the folder structure. So whatever the folder name is, you do the folder name slash the CSS file that you're trying to reference. But in this case, our style and the index are on the same level, so I don't need to put in any directory in front of it. So we can now go back to styling our CSS tag. Now let's watch the same thing we did during internal CSS. We do the same thing here, just that it is now external to the web page. So I want to target all the H1 elements. Remember, we have 2 H1 elements on our page. One is welcome to CSS. The other one is, this is another H1 tag. So I'll do H1 as a type selector. That means it's an HTML type itself, not a user defined type like classes or IDs and the likes. So you open your curly brace like we talked about. All your rules must be inside your curly braces. All the rules must be inside the curly braces. So, and what is the rule we want to do? We want to do color colon red. Oh, can you see that? Immediately, what we have on the right has been styled. So this gives you a clean design, clean web page, clean design. I'm not littering my HTML with CSS everywhere in the body, inline, internally, and all that. No, this gives you a clean structure. So if I need to edit this web page, I need to change the color of this particular tag, I don't even have to come to this HTML page because I don't want to introduce bugs. I can just come to the CSS and change the color. Let's do blue. You can see immediately, without even going to the web page, just changing the style alone, the live server reloads the page and will now have the style applied to that particular element, to those particular elements, because there are 2 of them. So you can see. So this is, so again, let's target the P tag. P, open your curly brace, What are we trying to do? Let's give it a font size of 30 pixel. You can see automatically it has reloaded. Let's give it a background color. Let's say background color of aqua or aquamarine. Oh, can you see that? I am a paragraph. It's not inside or now has a background without even touching. Look at clean HTML here. Without touching the HTML, I'm styling the CSS, styling those HTML inside my external CSS. So this is how you build your web pages. Again, we said the HTML gives us the structure. This is the structure of this page. There is a header, there is the body, there is a H1 tag, there's a paragraph that describes the structure. But then this describes the presentation. How we're presenting it to the end user. What would the user see? How we describing what the user sees? See, you do that externally in a CSS file. All right, so that is the basic way of styling your HTML page and styling text and all that. So let's talk about different selectors and how selectors are used or how they are combined. So I talked about the type selector, which is what we have demoed here. Type meaning that we have or we are targeting a particular HTML page, a HTML element. In this case, I'm selecting the H1 tag, I'm selecting a P tag to style. So this is an example of a type selector. And how do we even combine those selectors? So this is a type selector, that's one. Now let's talk about classes. Now, or let's talk about IDs first. An ID is another type of, let me copy this. Selectors and all that. So CSS selectors. So now you do ID selectors by giving it an attribute ID, right? ID equals the name of the ID, the name of the selector. For example, I want to name this title, right? Remember we're talking about CSS selectors now. First and foremost, everything we've been doing before now, we've been doing the type selectors. We're targeting those types themselves, the HTML tags themselves. But there are times you want to use an ID to target something, right? Inside your web page. So you give it an ID, title, and then in your style, so let me remove all this, or let me comment all this out. So we're back to the default settings. You can see everything is black, the default style. So now let's use our ID now. So you use the ID selector by referencing it with hash, title, then let's give it your rule, CSS rule. Can you see? The same thing we've been doing, the same thing we did with type selector, we just did that with, somebody's asking, is ID the same as class? No. Class ID is when you, just like you want to search for a needle in a haystack. You want to target one particular element or a particular element, you use an ID. Meaning that if you have, like right now we have, let me name this H2. So I have H1 tag, H2 tag, P tag. And remember, we can also add or have children or nest. That is the word. We can also nest elements. Assuming I have another div tag, right? And I nest a list item. Let's do 3. Home, about, store, whatever. So look at this element on ordered list, as we learned last week, is nested inside this div element. Also, the list items li, short for list item, we have 3 list items that are nested inside ul, right? Now, I'm trying to differentiate the ID selector versus the class selector. With class, you can use class to select multiple elements at the same time. But for an ID can only target one element. So, assuming I want to target only this about item, I can use just ID. I can do ID equals about, right? Look at that. Come to the CSS. Again, for IDs, you start with hash, about, the name of the ID, open your curly braces, and then let's give it a color of pink. No, color of pink. Can you see? So this is ID, right? I'm targeting just this one, from this level down to this level, down to this level. 3 steps, 3 nesting. So you use an ID to target one element down the tree, or anywhere in your code. But you use a class, from the word class. You're having a class of things. When we say a class of students, that means we're having so many students, right? But each student has an ID. Remember, so each student has an ID, whatever. Every student should have a unique ID. When you sign up on a platform, you have a unique ID assigned to you. When you register yourself or you enroll yourself in a school or in this boot camp, there is a unique ID attached to you. So if I want to target you only, I want to go down the tree of HTML elements to look for you, then I can use an ID to target you, right? But if I want to apply a particular rule to several elements, right, then I can use a class selector to do that. So that is the difference. So we will still come to that. Thanks for asking that question. That's a good question. So we're talking about ID selectors. ID is you are looking for a needle, right, in a haystack. That means you have a haystack, you want to search, and a pin dropped in that haystack. You are going down, you are searching, you go down to pick it out. Use an ID to do that. And that's what I just explained. Technically, an ID should have a unique value attached to a particular element. You can't use the same ID for 2 different elements. JavaScript will not even allow you, right? So take note of that. So this is let's comment this. Let's give you some notes as well. This is type selector. This is ID selector. And then let's talk about class selector. So a class, again, like I explained, you have a group of items to style. So you use a class for that. And by the time you start coding, you start seeing other source codes, viewing different sources online. You discover that CSS class is the most used CSS selector out there. So it is very common because you want to target so many elements at the same time. So commenting again, just look at what you can see on my screen. You can see the comment we're having in CSS is different from the one you're having in HTML because they are different files, they are different technologies. In CSS, comment starts with /*, then the text of your comment, you close by doing star and then /. For those coming from programming languages like Java, C# and the likes, they should be used to this type of comment. It's called document comment. So that's that. So let's talk about CSS selectors. Let's talk about style selector. So style, how do we do style? Assuming I want to style all the list item elements. I have 3 of them now. 1, 2, and 3. I want to style all this together. Instead of giving each one of them an ID and then start duplicating so many IDs here, which is again what we talked about. Don't repeat yourself. As much as possible, don't repeat yourself. So with a class keeps or groups all those styles together, and then you can apply that to the CSS. So now, how do you declare a class selector? You declare a class selector with a dot notation, dot notation, and then even before then, let's come back to our HTML. So we want to group all this into a class, right? We want to group all this into a class. We're using a class selector now. So I can say use the attribute class and then the name of the class. You are beginning to get the gist now. For an ID, we use an attribute ID here. Look at it. For an ID selector. For a class selector, we use an attribute class. You can see, you use an attribute class. Somebody asked, can an element have more than one class or ID? So an element can have more than one class, but an element should have only one ID. Like I explained, an ID should only identify one element, but a class, one element can have several classes, and I will demonstrate that here now. So look at this point here. So I'm grouping all this UL element into a class. That is the definition of a class. I'm grouping this UL element into a class. So how do we target this class now? Or let's give it a name first. Let's name it, what name should we give to this? Let's say links or something. Let's just call it links, whatever name, links, right? Because they look like links, home, about, store. So that is the name of the class. So inside our style, how do we do it? I said you do a dot, remember a dot, the name of the class, links. Let's check again, links, because if it's wrong, it won't take effect, it should not be rendered. Dot links, I seen this, dot links, and then you open your curly brace, which means all the elements under this that are referenced by this class, right, will have the same rule applied to them. So let's see what rule are we trying to apply. Let's just say color, or let's do font size. Let's do color so that we can follow along, we can see color easily. And then let's make it, let's say coral. Can you see the right hand side? Can you see home, about, store? Now we're going to talk about that about. Yes, this is very good. The ID selector and the class selector. There's something called precedence, order of precedence. So we have styled, there is a rule or a class called links, right? So if I go back here, this links applies to all these elements together, meaning all the items, all the list items. There are 3 of them now. You can have multiple of them. I can do all this. So the style already applies to all of them. That is the class. But look at, because we have an ID here, ID is very unique. Again, we have a group of students in a class. We have 50 students, right? Each student should have a unique ID in the register. Student 001, student 002, student 003. So even though all students are wearing the same color of shirts in that particular school, they are wearing the same school uniform, I can still identify, hey, student 001, come forward. Student 001 comes forward, even though they are all wearing the same coral color. I can now say, oh, student 001, because you are unique, because I'm calling you out, I'm giving you a different color. This is what is happening here. That's why the pink is taking effect here, even though all these elements have the class links applied to them. Hope we are getting it now. So the title, the ID selector is very unique. We are going down the tree and selecting that particular one and styling it. Let's give this a different color. Let's make it, let's say, deep pink. Let's do deep pink. No, I don't like this. Let's do aqua. Yes. So we can see. So because ID has been applied to this about list item, it's always going to remain like that. Even though, look at this point, there's a class applied to them. So how do we fix this? You take out ID. That means, hey, student 001, back to your class. All of you are wearing the same coral or orange uniform. Go back to your class. But in this case, look at ID. Hey, student 001, come out. Wear what is that color again? Let me look at it. Aqua, yes. Put on an aqua school uniform. Put on an aqua color because we are unique. So I'm selecting out that particular student 001. So with an ID, I'm using 001 as the ID of that student, right? But in this case, the ID here is about. So about. So that's what I'm trying to achieve here. So we've talked about type selector. We talked about ID selector and then class selector. So somebody asked, can we have multiple classes applied to the same class, to the same element? Yes. A student in class 4 can also be in a class of footballers. Is that not true? Oh, this student is in class 4, right? In that school. But there's also a class of footballers. There could also be a class of the band class, those who are in the band unit in the school. There's also a class for cheerleaders, right? So the same student can have several classes. So now let's demonstrate that. Let's say we want to apply another class to this same, look at this same U element. How do we do it? To apply multiple classes to the same element, you do space, look at links, space, another class, another. I'm just naming it this way, but of course, when you are designing your website, you give it a, let's say, another class, right? So what are we trying to achieve with another class? I'm grouping these 5, therefore 5 list items into 2 classes. So what are we trying to do now? So let's target this class again. Let's go back here. Let's say this class dot another class should have font size, let's say font size of 30 pixel. Oh, can you see that? Look at font size 30 pixel. So this same class, this same element UL now has more than one class applied to it. Because, like we explained, in a class of students, you can have some that are into a class of footballers, another class that are into the school band, another class who are into swimming, you know. So you can apply several classes to the same. Um, all right, so let's move on. We've talked about classes, right? Or let's talk about the CSS box model. CSS box model. Let me show. I hope you can see my screen. Now, what we're trying to do here is to establish what the box model is all about, right? So the CSS box model says that every styled element has these attributes, or you can actually apply this sort of boxed attribute to them. It's like it creates a box around that particular element. The middle is the content. For example, the content, you can apply a padding around the element. You can apply a border around that particular element or content. You can then apply a margin round about it. All right. Of course, you don't have to have all these in the same order. A particular element can only have may only have padding, right? That's that. It may only have the border, or you can combine border and padding. One may only have the margin, or you can combine margin and padding, whichever way you want to do it. This is the box model. Now, in this box model, there are dimensions. The top is at the top, obviously. The right is at the right. Bottom is at the bottom. Left is by the left. Now, this is very important because by the time you start styling your elements, the order matters. The order matters. And we're going to demonstrate that. Meaning that when we have, so let's go back, let's demonstrate the box model. Let's just talk about that now. CSS box model. CSS box model. Box model. Now let's give it a paragraph. Let's have a paragraph. This is a box, right? Let's give it a class because we are now good. We know what a class is. I can say let's call it box. Now let's style our class here. Dot box. Remember, it's a class, so you start with dot box. Let's give it a font size of let's say 20 pixel. Let's say font weight. We've not talked about that. There are so many attributes or so many rules. Font weight. Assuming I want to make it bold or bolder or lighter, you use the font weight in CSS. Font weight. Let's make it 700. You can see it's now bold. Font size. Let's make it 50. Very bold. If I make this 400, 400 is the regular font weight. You can see it, not bold. You can make it thinner, different. So you just experiment. So you have it from 100 down to 900. So let's say 200, for example. Font weight 200. Let's try. Oh, something is wrong here. You can see there's a bug in my script. 5 dvb. That's why this font weight 200 is not taking effect. So you learn how to debug. Font size should be 5 pixel. I thought I wanted to do 50 pixel. Yeah, I wanted to do 50 pixel. Now look at font weight of 200. Let's do 100. Let's do 600. Ooh, can see. Let's do 900. Can see. So bold. And you can also use the text bold here as well. CSS recognizes this as well. Now we're talking about the box model. So let's put a background on this. Background color. Let's make it aqua again. Now come back to this place. So we said this is the box model. When you apply a style to your element, CSS builds something like an invisible box around that element. So the content is there. This is the width of the content. This is the height. You can see, which is what we are doing here. If I bring out this so that I have it. Now look at. So by default, the content, because it's a block element, right? It's going to fill the entire parent container. It's going to fill, you can see the background is filling the entire parent container of this page. So take note of that, because it's like a box, and P itself, the paragraph, the P element is a box, is a block level element, So now, how do we add? Let's add padding. Let's do padding. Let's add padding to this, and we'll talk about the dimensions of the box model. Now let's do padding. Let me start with 30 pixel, 10 pixel, 5 pixel, and let's do 15 pixel. So let's go back to what we have here. Did you notice any difference? There is now space, that invisible box that have been built round about that element. Remember the box model. The padding, there's now a space at the top, at the side, at the bottom, at the left. Look at, let me bring this, let me just put this together again so that we can see. I'll tile window to left and then select this one. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. So I can now drag this to the right. So look at, so let's remove padding. Let's comment out this line 33 here. Look at the right hand side. Ooh, did you see that? Look at the right hand side. In fact, before now, we did not even talk about resetting your CSS. You can see it's like there is still, even though there is no border applied to this box selector, it's like there is still some border at the bottom here. It is because, like we said, every HTML element has a default style, like padding, margin, and all that. So at the bottom, there's already a style applied. So the best practice is when you are, before you start styling your CSS, you reset your HTML or you reset your style using the global selector. Yeah, that's another selector. So when you do star, this star means that whatever rule you write in between these curly braces will be applied to all the elements. So developers use this to reset the default HTML styles so that you have a clean slate to start with. Because by the time you don't do this, then you are mixing the default styles of the HTML with what you are doing. So, which most times may not give you an accurate dimension, especially when a UI UX person gives you a design, and the design contains or has its own dimensions, and you don't reset your CSS, it may not produce the desired output. So somebody's asking, what are global selectors? So global, from the word global means that I'm targeting all the elements on this web page, all the elements, not a class, not an ID. That means HTML, body, meta, head, H1, H2, div, and the like. So once you do star, and then you give it whatever attribute, is going to target all those elements. But what we want to do now is to quickly reset. Reset. Let me do this. Reset to default style. Or remove default styles. Not it's called CSS reset, but let's just call it remove default styles. Right, so we're removing the default styles. So first, let's remove margin. Margin now start observing the right hand side. Start observing our output. So if I do margin 0, oh, did you see that? Let me undo this again. Oh, can you see that? So the star element, inside it, I'm doing margin 0, meaning that all elements on this page should have 0 margin, Remember our box model? Let's come back to our box model. This is the margin, the word margin. That means space around this box, around this content, this element. This content is the element. So there's now a margin round about this element, right? That's margin. So now if I do star inside the curly brace margin 0, look at everything. I've all the elements, the margins for all the elements have been reset to 0. This is very good because by the time you start working and working on designs and all that, the designers will have their own specific dimensions and sizes and margins and everything that you need to apply to elements. So it is a good practice to reset your CSS. So all margins have been set to 0. You can also remove all paddings. Now observe again. Let's do padding. Let's do 0. You can see padding has been set to 0. Let's do what else again? We can also do border. Let's do border. There are frameworks. There's CSS reset framework you can even use, but this is just something small you can write in your source code. Border none, you can see, and then another important one is the box sizing. But I will explain that now. Box sizing. Let's make it border box. Now somebody may be asking, how do I know all these things? It is because I've used them before and there are documentations, right? So don't say, oh, where will I get all this from? How will I know this? No, there are documentations online. Last week we talked about what is it again? MDN documentation. Go to MDN CSS reference. You see all this. So you don't memorize source code. You don't memorize source code. See CSS reference. Everything is here. See rule syntax, how to use them, properties, modules, anchor positioning, animation, so many CSS colors. You see how to use all these things. So always consult your reference documentation. Always consult your reference documentation. So box sizing, let's make it border box. Border box. Now, why is this box sizing important? And we are putting this under the reset section. We are resetting our CSS, right? It is important because, let's go back to our box model again. Assuming we have an element, right? We have an element with a particular border. And you don't reset, you don't give it a box sizing of border box. By default, CSS will add to the size, will add the dimension. Let's say, look at this purple, or let's use this one. Let's use padding. Look at this color, this blue padding area here. Assuming on this left hand side it is, let's say it is 2 pixel top, 2 pixel bottom, right? Now if you don't reset this if you don't use this particular rule, what CSS will do is that CSS will add 2 pixel plus the length, this width of this element, plus another 2 pixel here. CSS will give it to that element as the width of the element, meaning if the original element has a size of 50 pixel horizontally, and then there's a padding of 2 pixel by the left, 2 pixel by the right, CSS will now calculate that as 54 pixel as the size of the element, right? So this is very important because when you are designing according to specification, you want to make sure that you are doing what you've been instructed to do or what the designs say. So if the design says, oh, this element should be 50 pixel, it should be 50 pixel. Don't add extra padding length to them. So if you don't do that, it's going to add extra 4 pixel to this element. Now it will now be contrary to what the design says. Now, how do you solve that? You solve that by using box sizing equals border box. That means the border should take the size. So CSS automatically recalculates this. So let's do this. Let's do the math here. We said this is 54. The length, the width of this element is 54. The padding on the left is 2. Padding on the right is 2. Now, if you do that border sizing and you reset the border, CSS will now recalculate the size of what is being displayed. It will take this 2 and push it in. Take the 2 here and push it in, meaning that will be the length, the new length of the content will now be 56 plus the pushed in border of 2, pushed in border of 2, making it, did I say 56? 46. So 46 plus 2 gives you what? 50, which is the specification from the designs. Take note of that. So that's what I'm trying to explain with resetting, or that is the importance of resetting to or removing the default settings. So now, let's go back to, we're still explaining the box model. So now let's go back again, give it a border, a padding rather, padding. Now look at padding. So the first element here, look at this box model. This is how it works. How do you add, which one is 30? Which one is 10? Which one is 5? Which one is 15? This is how it works. So it moves clockwise. So starting from the top is the first dimension, to the right, to the bottom, and to the left. You can see, look at 30 pixels to the top, 10 pixels to the right, 15 pixels to the bottom, 5 pixels to the left. It moves clockwise. So don't assume that, oh, it is from, you know, the way we write, we read from left to right, right? Some people will say left, top, bottom, right. No, it is from top, right, bottom, left. Now let's test it. Which one is the biggest here? Let's do 60 pixel. You can see the 60 pixel is applied to the top, which means this first dimension here is for the top of this element. Then the next one is right. This is 10. Let's do a padding of let's do 50 pixel. Now you may not see this because there are no other elements close to this, but trust me, there is a padding of 50 pixel applied to the right. The next one is bottom. Remember, clockwise, top, right, bottom, left. Top first, right next, bottom, left. So when you have all the 4 dimensions like this, now CSS, there are different ways of expressing this, of doing the same thing. This is when you have all the 4 attributes, all the 4 values applied. You can also do, we'll still talk about that, but let's just finish this first. So for the third one, let's increase the padding at the bottom. Let's make this one 100. You see what will happen now? Oh, can you see that? That means the padding from here to here, from this text to this point, has been increased. So, and you can see it's the third one. Then the left hand side, which is the last item here, applies to the left hand side of the box. So let's make this 200. See what will happen. Ooh, can you see? That is the padding. This is 200 pixel padding from the left. That's one way of doing this. Now, another way of doing this, sometimes you may want to just style, use the same sizes. Assuming I want to do top and bottom, top, bottom, make it 60-60. Then right and left, make it 200. Now, if you have, again, try not to repeat yourself. So if you have a specification like this, right, there's a shorter way of doing this, which is, let me duplicate this. So I can do 60 and 200. All these, you see them in the reference documentation. So let me comment this out. So look at 60, 200. Now, this is now the meaning. 60 to the top, 60 to the bottom, 200 to the left, 200 to the right. That's the meaning. See? So there are different ways. You can also target just one side alone. Padding left. If I do padding left alone, 200 pixel, I can comment out this. See? Padding left. I'm applying 200, or let's make it 100 pixels only to the left-hand side of this box. Similarly, there's padding right, padding top, padding bottom. You can see. So there are different ways of doing the same thing. So we're almost at time. This is 3 minutes to 4. This is 3 minutes to 4. So let's quickly look at using dev tools. And I think we touched on this briefly. Using your dev tools. For those who are just joining, let's look at how to style directly from your dev tools. So every web page has a developer tool that you can go to, right? So if you right click on the page and you do inspect, select inspect, or if you press F12 on your keyboard, it should bring up the developer console or developer window or panel. So if I do inspect here, look at, it gives you this. This is the source code that we've been writing. Look at all the comments. The source code, everything appears here. So here we can test our CSS, we can test the elements, we can reprogram, we can redesign, and then go back to reapply it on your source code. For example, if as I'm hovering on each of the elements, you can see how the browser is highlighting that section. Or I can even select and go to that part and click on it. Look at, see, it highlighted this for me that this LI element has a margin of 0, has a font size of 30 pixels. Assuming I want to target or I want to remove, you can see the class, I'm adjusting the class directly from the browser using the developer tool. So I can also increase, I can come and double click on it, increase the size. Can you see? I'm increasing the size. So there's a lot you can do with your developer tool. By the time we start working on JavaScript, you can see the output of a JavaScript under the console tab. There's also the style editor here. You can see all your styles here. You can edit at that point. I can make this 6. You can see automatically it's affecting. I'm editing my style directly on the browser. I can make this let's make it 40 pixel. Let's make this, uh, let's change this color to blue. Ooh, can you see that? You can edit your source code directly on the browser. So this is the backend of our server, right? Of our website. This is where we have the default settings. So if you refresh, if you go back and you refresh this, you can see everything resets back to what you have on your server. I'm using server here because you deploy your website to a server. So in this case, our server is a local host. So even though you can edit all this, it's a way of learning, growing. It's a way of learning how to use all these tools. So you can directly edit your CSS here. Once you like what you see, you copy it from here and take it back to the server and replace what is there in the server. Somebody's asking which browser is this? I think this is Firefox. Yeah, Firefox, all browsers have this developer tool. So I have this, I can also demo this on Chrome, but it's just the same thing. All browsers have this. So you can install some other extension. This is Redux. Redux, by the time we start working on React and all that, this is a Redux extension. You know, so many things you can do with your developer console. So as a developer, you have access to this. Any website you get to, right click on it, go to inspect, and then you have access to all this. You can even learn. Once you get to a website, you see something nice. Oh, how was this CSS written? Just come here and look at it. Or how was this part of the HTML structured? Come here, look at it. And you can even borrow, you can copy from it and use it. That's the world of programming for you. So yeah, thank you very much, you guys. This is the end of the class.